But the war drums are beating and ECOWAS is preparing. On Thursday and Friday, the security chiefs will be meeting in Accra to draw up a plan of attack. What are they considering? They're considering the military action in Niger. But the big question to ask tonight is, can Ghana afford to deploy? Yes, ECOWAS is deciding to go, but can we join them? Can we afford to do so? And Ghana is taking the lead role in this potential deployment, considering that we are playing host to the Chiefs of Defense Staff meeting in Accra on Thursday and also on Friday. And the key things that we know has happened is that ECOWAS has activated a standby force ready to deploy. They now have to deploy, do the planning for that to happen. Our defense minister has already said when that call is made by the heads, by the presidents, the commanders in chief, they will go. Ghana will have to join. And so that's where we are tonight in terms of the arrangement to deploy. We know that that meeting called for Thursday is going to be held at the Burma camp and is going to be from the 17th to the 18th, a very important meeting. The understanding is that that meeting will draw up that plan of attack going into Niger when ECOWAS decided to go. We know that the ultimatum has failed, and ECOWAS was trying to use that to sort of force the military junta in Niger to withdraw from what they've done in terms of the taking over of the constitutional rule there and imposing a military rule. Diplomatic negotiations are pending. They had attempted to go in. That didn't happen. They, again, on the show confirmed that they would attempt again. Still, we haven't had any much of the diplomatic intervention and the success of that or otherwise. What we've heard a lot more about is the potential military intervention which is pending. Now, the key issues that we need to consider is the cost that this will impose on ECOWAS countries, particularly Ghana, considering that Ghana and Nigeria are playing the pivotal role in the mobilization of the sub-regional force to go into Niger. Now, if you look at the ECOWAS plan that they announced before the UN Security Council last year, to be very precise, on the 4th of December, and it was announced by the ECOWAS Commission Chief himself, Dr. Omar Traore, and he told the Security Council that there's a plan now to deploy what they call the ECOWAS Peacekeeping Force. That is how they termed it. If you look at the ECOWAS Treaty itself as revised, it also makes mention of the fact that ECOWAS can actually deploy this peacekeeping force, which is what is now being called this standby force. And they want to deploy that. But interestingly, he put a figure to what it will cost. They have two options. One option is to have this brigade of 550,000 troops, a brigade of 50,000 troops. This will be a permanent standby force all year round, and he put a figure to it. $2.3 billion is what it's going to cost ECOWAS to maintain this 5,000 troops. And this is according to the ECOWAS Commission Chief, Dr. Omar Traore, before the UN Security Council. And then it comes to the second option. The second option is to have a deployment of troops on demand, which is going to cost us some 360 million. I'm talking about ECOWAS. Now, if you break this down, this gives you 30 million a month and 7.5 million every week. ECOWAS countries will have to bear this. Ghana is included in that. And remember, the less number of countries participating in the deployment, the more burden we will have to carry in finding the money to finance this if indeed we deploy these troops on demand. And that is the approach that they are considering right now. And who is going to fund it? ECOWAS. And we've already heard that the United Nations is a place we need to possibly go for some approvals as well. But the US and France, they have interest there. They have bases in Niger. So they have significant interest. Will they support with the funding for this to happen? And that is a conversation we'll have when my guests join me for a conversation. But you begin to see in an economic crisis such as we have it, this is going to be a Herculean task indeed. And today there's been meetings in Parliament. There's been a division on what the law says and whether or not Ghana should and can intervene, considering the constitutional provisions governing what we should do in these matters. We'll talk about that when Professor Pejutua joins us for a conversation. And as you can see there, this is the map. And when it comes to the troops' strength, And this is according to the World Bank latest data, 2023, and last updated to give us a sense of the military strength. Of course, the superpower in all this is Nigeria, our big brother. And Nigeria is commanding a significant number of troops, 223,000. But if you look at Ghana, it's at 16,000. But you look at Niger, as updated by the World Bank, they are in the region of 10,000 indeed there. So that tells you that they have a significant force there. And as the analysts have said, you need 3 times that force. So you need about 30,000 of that. To Gianni and his cohort of men who have taken over. So you begin to see that the challenges that we're beginning to see. But look at the Defense Ministry's budget. This is what they need to draw on. This is 23, what was approved for them, a headline number of 3.74 billion cedis, by the way. That is a tiny little drop in the ocean of what I just described for you. What will be spending on a monthly basis, 30 million, 7.5 million on a weekly basis. So we simply do not have the money. We haven't projected and budgeted for this. Where do we find the money, considering what we've said we'll use our monies for the Defense Ministry, construction of the forward operating base, that is 262 million, 10 million for defense advisory services. If you're even taking amount from here to finance this is less than $1 million, right? And then 10.21 million for ammunitions and other accoutrements. This is a tiny, tiny drop in the mighty ocean when it comes to ammunitions, etc., to actually wage any form of military intervention. So this is just to give you a picture of what the cost is. My guest will join me, and we'll look at the very important subject that we, as Ghanaians, will have to consider. Is this in our national interest? Stay with me after this.
Daddy, this tank is big.
Yes, that's true.
It can store a lot of water.
That's so true.
Wow, it has a working tortoise on it.
That's so true.
I can see S-I-N-T-E-X. Syntax.
That is so true, my daughter.
When it falls down, it will spoil.
That's not true.
But why?
Hey! Syntex was the first to introduce double-layer tanks in Ghana. Syntex again was the first to introduce white inner layers in Ghana. Syntex gives you the biggest warranty, 7 years. No matter your water needs, Syntex is the answer. Syntex tank. Are you strong? Are you tough?
Hello, my name is Abeku Agri Santana. If there's anything that makes my life so easy, it is my bank. I love hanging out with my boys at our usual fufu joint. But even without cash, we still dey chop better with EcoBank Mobile. No matter the time of day, my bank helps me stay in touch with my beautiful wife whenever she's away. And when my beautiful wife is in town, she never misses out on her favorite TV shows because I'm able to pay up all my TV subscriptions from the comfort of my mobile phone. Whenever she has to get groceries too, my bank makes it cashless and convenient. And the part my wife loves the most is when my bank makes it possible and easy for her to shop from any part of the world without moving.
Welcome to the smart world of EcoBank. Download EcoBank Mobile from Google Play Store or the App Store and discover the smart way to bank. EcoBank, the Pan-African bank.
There are days when you think, whoa, today I've earned it. So order a Glovo. Days when plans run longer. What if we order a Glovo? Or days when you can't control everything. Oh yes, because on Glovo, you can order anything you want. Glovo, you order, we deliver.
Crazy pa. Risky. Wash. All of a sudden, my voice I hear different. And when you saw a call. Barman, bring me the honey whiskey. You know the one? Black Rock whiskey.
Honey whiskey.
Chalet, honey near their fro. Black Rock whiskey is strong. Now so taste me is smooth and it goes down easy. Excuse me.
Barman.
Barman, bring my friend one Black Rock whiskey.
Black Rock whiskey, blended with natural honey flavor.
Hey, what's up?
Barman.
Hey, what the hell for Sikanton Sata? The pure Bintoma Nano.
Black Rock whiskey can be a feeling smoothness, no.
Drink responsibly. Not for sale to persons under 18 years of age and not recommended for pregnant women. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the FDA.
My name is Tina. I am a person living with HIV. I got to know my HIV status after I gave birth and lost the child because of HIV. In those days, prevention of mother-to-child transmission services had low patronage due to fear and stigmatization. Today, many HIV-positive women have delivered negative children. I follow the guidelines and take my HIV medicine called ARVs every day, as prescribed by my doctor. This makes me strong and healthy, and also prevent me from passing HIV onto any future child. Please, avail yourself of PMTCT services when pregnant. It is the only way to ensure you do not pass the HIV onto your baby during birth or pregnancy. If you have tested for HIV recently and it was negative, test again when pregnant. If you have tested positive, go to the hospital after birth as directed by your healthcare provider. Your baby will be given medicine immediately and tested to ensure baby and mother are well. Let us work together to have an HIV-free generation.
Our children must be free to shine.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to demonstrate to you the superior properties of Flamingo paint as compared to other paint brands on the market. We take equal quantities of Flamingo paint and this ordinary paint. We then dilute them with water. And now, let the test begin. The gentleman on the left is going to apply the ordinary paint, and the gentleman on my right will use the Flamingo superior paint. As you can clearly see, Flamingo has the obvious better hiding. Furthermore, Flamingo has painted a much larger area. You know, one bucket of Flamingo paint is equal to several buckets of any other paint brand on the market. Flamingo paint is made with superior formulation to give superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage. Flamingo paint, simply superior.
And thanks very much for staying with us on this very important subject. And I don't know how else to put it, but Ghana and Ecowas, they're on the brink of war. And I use war because it's a quote from the Junta Alliance. I'm talking about Mali, I'm talking about Burkina Faso, and I'm talking about Niger. And they've said, the two of them have said that if we attack Niger, they will see it as a declaration of war. And that is where we are. Even all that planning is going on. And so it's significant to talk about this. Thankfully, I've been joined in the studio by two men who understand this deeply, especially Colonel Festus Obwaji, retired, who is an author, is a conflict and security analyst. He's consulted for the UN, the AU, and himself has been boots on the ground before. Colonel, thanks for your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
James Agaga is a ranking member, Defense and Interior Committee. It's good to have him because today we saw the first attempts by the government to try and get the opposition party on board this possible deployment of Ghanaian troops. And so he's here to tell us, I know the minority, they are opposed to this because the party issued a statement and that they are not in favor of a deployment. And they've been consulted today. Has that changed their position? We'll try and find out. Professor Kojo Epejutia is Associate Professor of Law at the University of Ghana with significant knowledge on international law and also joins us on this. Prof, I'm grateful. There's a lot of legal hurdles we want you to help us navigate. Let me start with you, James. So just give us a basis for this conversation, because the very latest is what happened today with the defense minister coming to meet you all. How did that go?
Well, Evans, thank you. The defense minister met Joint Committee of Foreign Affairs and Defense and Interior, and together with the National Security Minister and the Interior Minister. Basically, what they did was to brief us on the unfolding situation in Niger behind closed doors. Now, I will not speak to the issues that were discussed in detail because I'm injuncted from doing so per the rules were set for ourselves prior to the commencement of that meeting. And so if I were to zero in on the details, it would amount to a betrayal of the trust that we forged. But having said that, one thing was very clear. The three security ministers did not come to the joint committees of foreign affairs and defense and interior to seek parliamentary approval. That is fundamental. In any case, if they had attempted to do so, the joint committees wouldn't even have the capacity because the committees do not constitute parliament. And so if you really want parliamentary approval, you come before the entire House with the Speaker in the chair presiding. Then resolutions can be passed appropriately. So what they did was to pass on some information to the committee. We argued. Our stance in the minority hasn't changed. We are firmly of the view that the Niger crisis ought to be resolved through diplomatic means. Through diplomatic means. We are convinced in our minds that we haven't exhausted the diplomatic option and therefore should not start a war in Niger.
Fair to call this consultations or information?
Well, they said they were consulting with us and they identified Parliament as a stakeholder.
Okay.
But I don't think that, in our view, we had put out a statement and argued strenuously that for Ghana to participate in a war, whether it is sanctioned by Ecowas or not, you need parliamentary approval.
Okay, if they come to Parliament and the vote says yes.
Well, then they would have sought the views of Ghanaians through their representatives. If you don't do that, you want to commit Ghanaian lives to battle. You know, soldiers are human beings. Some are, parents, our brothers, and so on and so forth. You want to commit them to war. And you think that it's not necessary to seek the consent of the people who raise and maintain them through their taxes. You see, the war effort, we just displayed some figures. The war effort would require funding. How are we going to fund them, assuming they were to move into Niger and the war becomes protracted?
Yeah. So let me ask you fundamentally, after this meeting today, you did not change your stance?
Not at all. In any case, we were not even invited to change any stance.
Okay, you were consulted.
We were consulted.
It didn't persuade you at
all? No.
If this comes to Parliament, assuming they attempt to that, you will vote against it?
Absolutely. Okay. I mean, we have made our position very clear.
Okay.
That you cannot pitch Africans against themselves.
Okay.
To fight in a war like, at the moment, there is no humanitarian catastrophe in Niger. Remember that.
Yes.
We are the ones going in there to create a humanitarian disaster for ourselves. I don't think that is necessary.
Okay. Stay with me. So that, I guess, is to give us clarity on where we are tonight with the very latest that happened today. And you know that PMS is always brought to you by Cherry Tree Properties. We develop spaces as though we are going to occupy them ourselves. The Syntex tanks, it is strong, it is tough. Alumo Bitters experience greatness in every moment. Ghana AIDS Commission, and also the very important information regarding the tanks that you should get if you want to store water. It is Syntex tanks. It has everything. Syntex tanks is first to introduce the double layer tank, and now you can also have as many layers as you want. Syntex tanks is first to introduce white inner layer tanks in Ghana, and we now introduce you to the customer specs order, which lets you order any color and size of preference. Syntex tanks gives you longest warranty, 7 years, which no other tank gives you in Ghana. So whatever your water consumption, size of project or demand, choose Syntex tanks. We have agents nationwide, 0244 335 168, or shop online at syntexgh.com. Syntex tanks, a strong, a tough. And Cherry Tree Properties desires our wishes. Beauty is a promise of happiness, but passion is everything. Thinking about buying a new home? Talk to those who build with passion. Sloan Square is a new gated community development at Sakumono, developed by Cherry Tree Properties, a one-of-a-kind, well-planned luxury you've never experienced. Call them on 0553 662 366. Cherry Tree Properties, sophistication and class. Colonel Festus Obadi, let me come to you. So we know where we are tonight. The military chiefs are meeting on Thursday and Friday. Parliament has been consulted. The position of the minority hasn't changed. From all your readings, are we really that close to deployment?
Well, thanks for having me. Personally, from an informed position, I don't think Ecowas is anywhere near deploying to Niger for technical reasons. Now, this is not a standing force. This is a standby force, which depends on contributions from its member states. It used to be 15, and some with significant contributions in air assets, ground assets, combat support, artillery, and so on. Now, 4 of them are now out of the equation. So that burden has to be redistributed among the 11. Then remember, among the remaining 11, there are small, excuse my language, but there are small countries like the Gambia. Some years ago, the Gambian army was about a company strong, one company, 120. Let's say they're about a battalion. Then you have Benin and Togo. Yes, they have armed forces. But these are very small armed forces.
You're right, the Gambia is 4,000 now, according to the World Bank latest update.
Well, when we read these figures from Jane's Journal, Defense Journal, World Bank, and so on, the way they compute them is not close to the reality. Sometimes they are behind schedule. So those numbers are not the numbers that we have on the ground. This is an operation where you need very well-trained troops all around air, maritime, maybe they will do the sea transport and so on. Because the country that we are going to or into has more recent combat experience. I'm talking about the Niger armed forces fighting insurgents since about 2012. So they have got that experience, that exposure, more than the rest of us, with the exception of Nigeria, doing small internal security things. The figure about Niger's strength, for instance, is suspect. I have read that the Niger armed forces is about 20,000, and the Senate decided before Bazoum was overthrown to increase that size to about 30,000 or so. So if you come to what we call force ratio, that anybody attacking another opponent in a defensive position needs 3 times the number of forces and the guns and everything, 3 times. So if Niger armed forces is about 20,000, that could even be higher with recent combat capabilities. When you go in, you need in the region of 50,000. The mistake that we may be making is what we made with regards to Liberia, ECOMOG, 1990. We went with 2,600 thereabout and struggled to contain Charles Taylor. At the peak of the operation, we were 13,000. We had assets from our partners from the West and so on. In other words, this meeting on Thursday must do the bolts and nuts, and the officers and the admirals know how to do that. The estimate. They know how to do that. And building what we've been talking about as risks. There are very serious inherent risks in this intervention. So the idea of the budget for this effort is also another debate that we must have. And I've had occasion before we came on air to request Ghanaians to go and read Dr. Obeda Samuel's book. I've forgotten the title, but I cited him in my ECOMOG book, that depending on your war effort from partners, be they Nigeria or Libya or the West, entails a lot of cost. At a point in time, Dr. Obeda Samuel has documented how Libya's Gaddafi wanted Rawlings to destabilize West Africa for the oil that Libya gave. I remember Libya oil was all over the continent and Ghana, giving us free oil. Nigeria was underwriting our economic challenges. And they wanted to, take a price from us. So if we are not in a position to fund this operation, we can be part of this operation without necessarily committing troops. When we went to ECOMOG, and this is what we've been doing since, my battalion was Task Force number 13. ECOMOG 13 was a task force. It was not a battalion like 2BN, 6BN, 1BN, and so on. This was a motley of officers and men drawn from elsewhere. First Abuaji, you are the commanding officer, your 2IC is this, your company command, education officers, and so on. Now, Niger is not a place for cooks, you see what I mean, and ordnance personnel who count boots and so on, to go into active combat. Here you need seasoned active combat people, what we call the TIF arm, infantry, armor, artillery, and so on. I don't think we have the numbers. Forget about what the minister is saying.
All the ECOWAS or Ghana?
No, Ghana and all the other ECOWAS countries. Because currently, every country is committed. For Ghana, we have commitments to the UN. And the last time I heard the General, Winfred Jandu speaking, it's close to 3,000, thereabout. So whatever numbers you read, those 3,000 are not here. And we have this thing that we call 3,000 under UN operation, let's say, another 3,000 standing by to go and replace them in 6 months' time. So that commits you to 6,000. Now the 3,000 who come back home, who return, for welfare reasons, must recuperate. They've got families, they've been away for 6 months, they don't come back and then you take them elsewhere. And that's one reason why America is suffering. Because they, change the cycle and send people end to end back to Afghanistan and so on and so forth. We don't have the numbers. Then at home.
So even Ghana, we don't have the numbers?
I don't think we have. Even in Ghana, we are fighting internal security operations, aren't we? Mm-hmm. So we have commitments in that.
See the military constantly.
Now, if you take your seasoned active officers and men and commit them to Niger, then you are weakening your effort in these internal conflicts. You see what I mean? This is why I said the debate must be about the national interest. It's not about an ECOWAS decision, and it's not about multilateralism. It's about whether the intervention serves Ghana's national interest.
What's your verdict on that?
My verdict, listening to me all over the places, is that I don't think Niger serves our, or will serve our national interest. See, from what I've been doing, I'm about to release a piece on unconstitutionalism, especially by civilians. And there are so many of these cases. Athanase Patrice Talon in Benin, who is now saying he's going to be part. This was somebody in opposition who said that he does not support 2 terms. The moment he got the vote, then he tried to change the constitution, which he did, 2017. It created a lot of instability. Let's go to Togo. It's a clear, classical case of civilian unconstitutionalism. You've served your father's remaining term. In fact, I've added, because I have not seen it anywhere, that what happened in Togo in 2015 was a military coup. It was the military high command of Togo that installed Faure Gnassingbé as a president, contrary to constitutional provisions, for the president of the Senate to have become president. Then go to Côte d'Ivoire, 2020. You served your term, you must bow out, you re-engineer the constitution with a lot of violence and so on. Now Ouattara, as he is, he's going to serve, if he wishes, 10 years up to 2030, discounting the term that he served. After all, the Civil War, 2011. So from 2011 to, let's say, 2023, how many years? 12? 13 years, plus another 7, almost 20 years. Côte d'Ivoire will be under one president. These are the issues that I've been arguing that we need to tackle. And we are not paying any attention to that. There are other countries that I can cite. Campouaris, Burkina Faso. The fortune was that the civilian population took matters into their own hands and got Campouari to leave. Even that, his general Dion Doré wanted to stage a coup, which failed. So if we don't want coups, which nobody wants, let us ensure that what we call democracy works. And democracy is not a cycle of 4 years, elections, and the rest is a mess that we see all around us.
You've made the point, and I'll come to explore that we can actually be part of this intervention without
troops.
So I'll ask you how that works out. Before I go to Apejutia, what do you make of the analysis? You are the Defense and Interior ranking.
The Colonel's analysis are very apt. Look, he talks about...
You've been a Deputy Interior Minister before.
Of course, yes.
So you understand the consideration that we have to make.
Absolutely. And I've heard people make reference to 1999 Ecowas protocol, which sets up the collective security mechanism for Ecowas. You need to look at the terms very well. And if you do, I think that protocol clearly is in sync with what Colonel just said. Look, it makes provision for intervention, even when there are massive human rights violations and a violation of the rule of law, not just when there are violent overthrows of democratically elected governments. So in a country like Guinea, where Alpha Condé, for instance, decided to re-engineer the constitution and give himself a 3rd term in office, and people took to the streets and started protesting. You saw what happened. There were massive violations of rights. People were shot dead. People were fired with tear gas. People were arbitrarily arrested and detained without trial. What did ECOWAS do? What was the response of ECOWAS? So you see, when you choose to selectively apply international protocols and so on, they lose efficacy. And so, to the extent that ECOWAS failed to act when civilian administrations abused the rights of their citizenry, I don't think morally it's right for them to quickly invoke Article 25 of the 1999 protocol and act in the manner that they want to act.
Yeah, but the Ghana question, though, and let's return to that point. You started by making the point. There's also legal considerations to make. You've argued that they have to come to Parliament for approval. They have to consult the people, the people's representatives.
Right.
Let's bring Prof in on that. Prof Pejitia, let's dissect that point for a second. So you've heard the minority make that point. Is there a legal basis for that in our constitution, for example, even in the ECOWAS treaty, that requires Ghana, once ECOWAS decides, to come and get ratification?
Thank you for having me. My point is that there is no legal basis in our constitution for the government in power to seek the support or to bring an issue to Parliament for Parliament to decide whether it wants to intervene in the particular context of Niger, for example, that we're talking about. Because when we want to talk about such situations, we refer to Ghana's international law commitments. And Article 40, Article 73, Article 75, these are the provisions we can refer to. Article 40 is talking about the fact that Ghana should conduct its international relations by referring to or complying with international law, including the use of diplomacy and other means to resolve matters. And it also talks about the fact that we have to adhere to the international organizations that we are parties to, reference in particular the UN, the Commonwealth, the African Union, and ECOWAS. And when you look at the ECOWAS treaty, starting with ECOWAS, it talks about the fact that the community has zero tolerance for unconstitutional changes in government. The AU has the Lome Declaration on unconstitutional changes in government, and it identifies 4 situations where there could be unconstitutional changes in government. One of it being a coup d'etat, which is the case we have in Niger. And in such a situation, the AU position is that they will not give recognition to the government that has come to power until it begins to initiate steps to return the country to constitutional rule. And where it does so, then before then there will be a freeze on membership for that country in its relationship with the AU and ECOWAS. And then when there are steps taken to return the country to constitutional rule, then we can talk about recognition de facto for the government in power. De facto meaning that at that time, the military regime would have had effective control over the territory or that particular country. So on these 2 grounds, ECOWAS has the power to intervene. And if it has the power to intervene, then Ghana as a party or a member state of ECOWAS, by reference to Article 40 and Article 73 of its constitution, should comply. Now, when we come to the United Nations as well, we have been looking at this issue as a threat to the use of force, or threat to the use of force. But we have to recognize the fact that when we're talking about whether there's a unconstitutional change in government, it creates 2 governments in power, one de facto, one de jure. The de facto is the one that has come to power through illegal means, and then the jure is the one that has been overthrown. And there will be recognition for either parts, depending on who is at play. But there is what we call collective recognition, which is given by an international organization of which that country is a member state. Mm-hmm. So in this situation, it is clear that ECOWAS has given collective recognition, that is de jure recognition, to the Bazoum government. And so Bazoum is saying that there has been unconstitutional change in government in my country. I want to restore democracy. So ECOWAS, come and help me. So ECOWAS going there, it's not declaring war to go and act against the government that has come to power. It is being invited by the dethroned government to come and help restore democracy in that country.
But do we need, by way I mean ECOWAS, a UN Security Council endorsement of this?
No, in my opinion, no, because this is not authorizing the use of force. It is under the UN Charter, Article 51 talks about right to self-defense. So we can look at it from that angle and say that Bazoum inviting Ecowas to restore democracy in that country does not need authorization from the UN Security Council.
Okay.
Having said that, there are situations where there have been attempts to, Ecowas, for example, has taken certain steps to intervene in some countries, and it has been later on retroactively endorsed by the Security Council. So legally, these are the situations on the ground.
Okay, so stay with me on that, because that's a very important point there. And Agaga, you're also a lawyer. First of all, he disagrees on the fundamental point that there is a legal basis to demand that they should come to Parliament. Well, where's the legal basis for you?
I will disagree with Professor Tuya on the score that, look, we keep talking about treaty obligations and so on. I mean, we should look at Article 75. And I have been trying to check from the Hansa to see what we did with some of the revised ECOWAS treaties, whether or not we brought them under Article 75 for ratification at the level of Parliament. In particular reference to the revised protocols that which is
the
relevant here,
yes.
1999, I'm yet to come across either a resolution that we passed to give effect to that particular protocol or not. And that is why I think that I want to agree with Colonel when he said earlier on that you would still require a UN Security Council resolution if ECOWAS has to use force in Niger. Prof spoke about a self-defense. I don't know how that principle will apply with respect to Bazoum.
Exactly.
Self-defense in what sense? Is it that the Republic of Niger suffered some external attack to qualify for the invocation of that principle? I thought that principle relates to instances where, for instance, a country is attacked, not internally from within for you to say you are acting on the basis of self-defense. If Chad were to launch an external attack with a review to ousting Bazoum, that principle could be invoked. But in this case, internally, there was something happened, and Bazoum was toppled. So, as a matter of fact, the proper principle to apply is the use of force. And if you have to do so, I think under the UN Charter, it is solely the Security Council which can pass a resolution authorizing such use of force. In this case, we don't have that. And Prof himself indicated that in times past, when ECOWAS took the decision to apply force in some specific instances, the UN Security Council subsequently ratified the use of force. That is an admission that the proper thing to do is to go to the UN right now and ask for a resolution authorizing the use of force. But you know why we don't want to go there? You know why?
Mostly because of the current geopolitical
If you go to the Security Council now, you won't have a resolution. Because now, is that the reason why you have all these Western powers seeking to hide under the umbrella of ECOWAS to do what they otherwise wouldn't be able to do if the matter were brought before the UN Security Council? But fundamentally, I made the point earlier on that, look, we can talk about our international obligations and how we must be compliant and so on and so forth. But here we are talking about war. You cannot go to war without funding. Who controls the purse?
Parliament.
Parliament. So will you come back to Parliament or not? So if you act in a haste, you deploy. Wait a minute. Tomorrow, Kendall spoke about assets. You know, you need to properly equip the troops to protect their lives, all right? Will you come back to Parliament or not? If you come, is it not about the same thing? You'll be seeking for approval to be effective on the battlefield.
You
cure that problem if you come first. If you come back after you have defied Parliament and gone, we'll turn you away.
How this is where must you have a budget before you go?
Well, the estimate process or the planning process entails a number of things. First of all, there is a strategic direction entailed in the decision on the 10th. The restoration of democracy, which I've argued is only the strategic intent. It cannot be the mandate for any armed force or armed forces. For armed forces do not restore presidents to office. Even in small Gambia, that was not the plan. The plan was for the military to threaten to dislodge, what's his name? Yahya Jammeh. And then after that, what happened? The diplomats met in Senegal and then installed Adama Barrow as a president. So that mandate itself is not clear. The budget will depend on the force structure, and I doubt whether the force structure is in place. Maybe Thursday they will refine it. Force commander, force HQ, is it a brigade? Is it loose battalions? How many? What are the combat support capabilities or assets? The armored vehicles, the artillery, signals or communications. Then, more importantly, the combat service support. The doctors, the medicals, the uniforms, the food. And from all that we're talking about, the arrangement currently on the African standby force, of which the Ecowas standby force is a part, is that this scenario is one that we call either scenario 4 or scenario 5. Scenario 4 is a complex mission, let's say. Now, when you are scenario 5, then you have what we call spoilers. So you can look at the CNSP and the entire Niger or certain segments of the Niger Armed Force as spoilers. You need 90 days. You see, to prepare to deploy. And during that 90-day period, all the contributing countries must support their own troops. And then the mandating authority, which in this case will be ECOWAS, will come in and maybe reimburse. The 90 days gives time for ECOWAS also to establish common user facilities like the forward operating base and so on and so forth.
It looks like they'll launch from Nigeria.
Yes. Now, as we speak, the ECOWAS Peace Fund cannot support this operation. I spoke with somebody, we don't know how, he didn't tell me how much is in it. But it is not going to be enough to support the Niger operation. Million. Now, the AU Peace Fund is about 400 million. And AU is now using the interest accruing on the 400 million to $400 million to try and pay off its debts in Somalia, which is about $20 million US dollars. You see, and then the Eastern African Commission Force that has just been committed to DRC, Eastern DRC. AU hasn't got money. Now, AU cannot also give its money to ECOWAS unless AU becomes the authority that mandates the deployment.
But there's the US, there's France, they have interest there. And from what we've
that is where the catch is. And that is why I've said that go and read Dr. Obed Asamoah's book. Why is France, or why should France be interested in supporting us to dislodge the CNSP? Why should America be interested in supporting ECOWAS to dislodge the CNSP? The impression is being given that they want to restore democracy. That is not the whole story.
What's the whole story?
The whole story is that all partners, get involved in such operations when they pursue their national interest. So for France, in Côte d'Ivoire, for instance, it's not that they love Côte d'Ivoire. It is just that Côte d'Ivoire has assets that they need to put their hands into. So that uranium that we've been talking about, which between US and France, each is about 17% of their energy requirements back at home. That is the reason why they are there.
But otherwise, imposed to fight
otherwise
in the Sahel.
How much force did they deploy to Afghanistan? 1,500 French troops, including those who have just been relocated from, what do you call this place? Mali and Burkina Faso. And I've just shown Honorable a certain article. Maybe it's fake news, but assuming it's not fake news, Chad is asking France to leave. You see what I mean? Yeah. Go. Increasingly, African states, i.e., the youth, are beginning to think that these partners are not here for our interests.
That's what we've seen.
They are here just to exploit our natural resources. You see what I mean? And our leaders must see through this. They are not seeing through that for a number of good reasons. One is that what we call the Ecowas authority, that leadership, is a club. In that club, you have Ouattara, who is not a Democrat. You have Gnassingbé Faure, who is not a Democrat. You have Atanase Patrice Talon, who is not a Democrat. You have, which is the other country left? Macky Sall, who is also not a Democrat. You see what I mean? Then you have Tinubu, who is contesting his legitimacy in court. So there are no Democrats in this in this club. And they are all there to protect, their tenures in office.
And very briefly, you said we can participate without sending troops. How do we
There
do
are many ways. For instance, we can share intelligence.
Okay.
For instance.
Can we send assets?
Then we can invest in the diplomatic effort, for instance. Then we can also, if you like, give money, whatever money we can mobilize. The boots on the ground is the tail end, the last resort option, which in this case, for strange reasons, ECOWAS put the last resort as the first resort, and is now trying to backtrack and put diplomacy somewhere where it should belong. You see it?
Let me get Prof in. Prof, so the legal question, you say, well, as far as UN is concerned, we don't need it. Parliament too, we don't need it. There's disagreement on that front, and that we can simply get in there and indeed attempt to restore constitutional rule. But that definitely will pose challenges for the North in terms of the UN architecture. From everything that you've said, it appears that even if they do post the intervention, some UN intervention in terms of clearing this path legally will be needed. Sorry, please unmute. I can hear you, yes.
The point I'm making is that when a coup is orchestrated, according to the African Convention on Human and People's Rights, it violates the sovereign rights of the people. It violates the self-determination of the people. And that has been clearly established by the Commission. And so we have human rights issues in there. And so however we want to term it, the government that is giving the jure recognition by ECOWAS and AU has the power to call for support. And so that is where I'm coming from. Having said that, the military has a role to play in democracy. The military is supposed to be an apolitical body in the country. But when democracy is threatened, the military can help to restore democracy. And so that is what has happened. Examples that have been given, including the situation that happened in the Gambia. It was the military that, Ghana, I think Senegal and Nigeria sent forces to the border, and that was enough to compel Jammeh to give up power. So in the case of Niger, I am definitely not in favor of military intervention, but I'm laying out the legal rules around, laying out the legal rules on the table. But if you go to Article 40, again, it talks about diplomacy. If you go to Article 73, it talks about diplomacy and the self-interest of the country. I think that these are critical steps and processes we should not ignore and help to resolve the situation one or the other. What I see ECOWAS do is that it is trying to use the stick and carrot approach, which is a way of using to be able to compel the other party to come to the table and to find a solution to the problem.
Yeah, and we see that playing out. I just need to wrap up. And in fact, they've invited press to cover the entire two-day session of the Ecowas chiefs, and which I thought was pretty unusual. And I mean, come into Burma camp and cover this for 2 days. Normally they would say come and cover the opening, but this is a 2-day invitation. Thank you, gentlemen. There's a lot to chew on. Agaga, maybe just a quick final word on this. So they meet on, you agree though that this is possibly an approach and a strategy that they're adopting to try and get the Niger junta to anticipate that this is going to happen, and then maybe get them to come to the table to talk. Maybe that's all they're doing. Also because it look at the strategy that they're adopting there.
Show the reason why they have gone back on their own threat. There's a retreat, clearly. It's because of the practical difficulties
of actually deploying,
which have been outlined by the Kennedy here.
Except that you need to do that to force them to the table.
But Evans, I just want to quickly to
shortly, yes.
40 Prophet
yes.
refer to. Look, if you look at 40C, 40C is very clear. It talks about
the peace option first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the peace option first.
Yeah.
And he agrees. And he agrees with that. You know? Thank you, Ken Officer Baji. Brilliant submissions. Great education on what it would take. And the verdict around the table, at least here, is the cost is just too much to bear. It's just too punitive for us, economically, militarily, diplomatically, security-wise. It's just too much to bear. But let's see what the security chiefs do on Thursday. President Epiditra, thank you very much for joining me also. Enjoy the rest of your evening.